What if the very drive that built your career and all of the success you've had up to this point is also the thing that's quietly breaking you? In this episode, I sit down with Jenny Wood, former Google executive turned New York Times bestselling author, to talk about ambition, obsession, motherhood, money, and what it really takes to walk away from what feels safe and comfortable in order to rebuild your life based on what you value most. This is Good Work, the podcast about the inner journey of outward success. Let's get to it. Jenny Wood, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Barrett.
Yes, thrilled about this one, as people will learn why. I want to start with, on your homepage, you introduce yourself, and you are great at shamelessly promoting why you are wonderful and what you are great at. And there's this little thing right at the end that says, and I'm a pilot, by the way. And I would just love to start there. How did you become a pilot?
I love to fly. I've always loved to fly in planes as a passenger. And as a kid, I was like, how the heck does this hunk of metal stay in the sky? And I would love taking off. I would love thinking about the concept of lift. And I remember as a kid putting my hand out the window of a driving car, or on the highway, and I'd tilt my thumb toward the sky and my hand would go higher, and I would tilt my thumb toward the ground and my hand would go lower. And it was like, well, wait, yeah, speed plus it sounds like that's what lift is. And I just became enamored by that concept. And when my now husband, went to business school, I remember the day we found out he was going to be going to Ann Arbor at University of Michigan for business school, Ross Business School. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're moving to Ann Arbor. And immediately, because we lived in New York at the time, where it's very hard to get your pilot's license in Manhattan, immediately I said to my father-in-law, we were sitting around the table, I know exactly what seat I was sitting in their house on Long Island, my in-laws. Yeah, he was my boyfriend at the time. And I was like, well, if you're going to business school, John, I'm going to get my pilot's license. And I immediately looked at where the closest airport was in Ann Arbor to the university. I knew we'd live around the university. And I, within seconds, I think, located a flight school 5 minutes from the university, called them, booked a discovery flight for whenever we were going to get there our first week. And the rest is history. And my father-in-law says, he references that a lot when I go after something I want and achieve it. And he says, I'll never bet against you, Jenny. You're the girl who said, I want to get my pilot's license. And most people would be like, yeah, whatever. He's like, but you do it. So I love to fly. I love to fly.
That's such a fun glimpse just into you and the dynamic with your husband's family and everything. Do you still fly today? You still maintain it?
I do. I fly very infrequently. I used to fly 3 or 4 days a week for years. And now I think the last time, I took the kids up a couple months ago. We had an absolute blast. When I'm flying, I'm so solely focused on flying. I'm in flow. I am thinking about nothing but my airspeed, my altimeter, what altitude I am at, holding that altitude, holding the altimeter, holding my heading steady. And it's just such a special space to be in versus the tumultuous world of, not tumultuous world, like all the stress and conflicts going on in the world right now, but even just like your day-to-day at your computer, where even if I want to be in flow from a work perspective, writing an article for a publication or building my next keynote or thinking through a client challenge, I heard about in a coaching call earlier that day, like I'm still distracted by my phone. There's all these other sensory inputs, even if my phone is in airplane mode or I close my email tab, there's still so much when you're on the ground, quote unquote, let's call on the ground in your day job or your day-to-day norm, where we're dealing with tech in some way all the time, no matter what your role is, I would assume. And then when I'm in the sky, I'm just in the sky. I am in the plane. I am focused completely on these instruments. And it's pretty cool.
I can relate to that so much. So 2 things that come to mind for me. One is I got a typewriter for Christmas. This was my one request. I wanted a typewriter. And I found that partly this was an excuse for why I wasn't writing, but also I did find that every time I sat down at my computer to do anything, it was like the task list.
Yeah.
And that always felt more important than whatever frivolous thing that I wanted to write that day and to express my creativity. And I started playing around. There's kind of modern typewriter-y type things. It's like a Hemingway and some other little devices that have these tiny little screens and you can't do anything other than type. And we looked into them and it was kind of like, I don't know. They don't look great. It just looks like clunky. And so anyways, we went all the way back. I got a 1937 Corona from my wife. She did a bunch of research, went to this classic little Portland restoration typewriter shop and bought it from this guy who is a total nerd that probably should come on the podcast to talk about it. And it's so delightful. It's that kind of thing. It's like I put my phone in the other room and I sit at the dining room table and I click clack on the typewriter and there's nothing else, you know, and it's exactly the experience I was going for. And I literally now I write social media copy, I write my newsletter, I write all of my stuff now on the typewriter because it does require more effort. My wrists actually hurt sometimes afterwards, but I also find that I sit there and I focus and I do the one thing I'm trying to do. And then the great thing about AI tools now is I just take a photo of all of it and it's immediately ready to go for digital.
Incredible.
So it's been super fun in that way.
Incredible. It's like getting back to craft, right? Like the actual feeling of your fingers touching something and molding clay into something or creation. It just feels very different when it's that manual process.
Yeah. I'm always looking for things like that take me away from my very active mind. We have this in common and get me into the present moment, fly fishing, hiking alone, downhill skiing, being on my typewriter. So I can relate to the flying feeling. One of the things I see in your story and having gotten to know you a little bit is there feels like this tension between being free and in the moment and just able to be fully yourself in whatever arises and achievement and pushing and getting things done and proving yourself. And I wonder, as you look back on your early life, if the tension feels true, first of all, and where you find the roots of both sides.
The tension absolutely feels true. You've nailed it. For example, my husband just quit his job and we now work together. He helps me run the business, which is keynotes and, again, coaching. And we have this book. And John optimizes for fun and leisure. Like that is his North Star. And I optimize for classic productivity, creating a thing, a social media post. Did we just land a new client? Can we pitch 10 more clients for my fall keynote schedule? And we had a discussion about it the other night. Discussion, argument, 6 of one, half dozen of another. And I think I said something along the lines of, some kind of criticism around his level of drive or productivity that I accomplish in a day versus him. And he's like, I think you need to optimize for leisure more, Jenny. And I was like, okay, touche. And I think he's right. Like yesterday, I did 4 keynotes this week so far, and it's Thursday, some virtual. And then I was just fried yesterday afternoon. I drove my daughter Noah to choir, and it was an hour, 15 minutes. I'm a very, very light Instagram user, but I just scrolled through this funny guy on Instagram and just like watched videos. And I was like, this is so uncomfortable for me. And I had to keep telling myself, I am optimizing for leisure. I am optimizing for fun. I am optimizing for giggles, right? And I was laughing. It was fun. Now, to be fair, I was maybe also thinking about what funny corporate TikTok videos or YouTube videos I could put into Instagram, rather, I could put into my keynote. But that was my initial goal. And then I started to just settle into doing it for the joy of wasting time, quite frankly. Now, where does that come from? That was A.
Yeah.
A is yes, you are correct. B is, gosh, where does the tension come from? Probably my parents. My mom was super laid back, very high empathy therapist, licensed clinical social worker. My dad is an Hungarian-born, escaped communist Budapest in 1956. Second generation Holocaust survivor, came to Canada, lived there for 25 years, built a business out of nothing. So that tenacity, that drive was necessary to allow him to be successful. Or in my mind, it was causation, not correlation of his success, maybe a little of each. So to me, I think I inherited, well, that's what you need to be successful. And I think that probably helped me rise through the ranks at Google. I think it's helped me as an entrepreneur, as an author, but it's a tale of two cities. My parents are a tale of two cities, absolutely the yin to each other's yang. And so I think that tension comes from like the little bits I got from my mom, the little bits I got from my dad.
This is why I ask. I'm always fascinated on this because obviously we're all shaped by whoever brings us up when we're little.
Mhm.
For many of us, our parents. And my mom loves it when I tell this story because she feels so bad about it now. But my classic story of my mom is I played Little League Baseball growing up. I played baseball through much of my life, but I was, I think, 12. And I was a pretty good pitcher at the time, even though I was very short. And I'm pitching in a 12-year-old Little League baseball game. Okay, listeners, you hear that I am 12 in a Little League baseball game. I think in the regular season, nothing matters. There's literally does not matter. There are no stakes. And God, I love my mother. My mother is in the stands, always at every game. She is a fanatic about sports. She drives my father nuts because it'll be a Tuesday night in the off season of three major sports, and she'll be watching like D3 volleyball or something on TV because she wants it on. It's comforting.
Sure.
Okay, so this is my mother. She's sitting in the stands and she stands up and she's just constantly yelling, not like yelling at anyone per se, just yelling. And I think I threw 3 balls in a row to this one kid who's batting. And she stands up and she goes, Barrett, throw strikes. And I step off the mound and I look up at her and I said, Mom, be quiet. I know.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, I mean, that's
But it's such the perfect encapsulation of how we get shaped by these things. You know, it's not like she was trying to make me a performance-oriented individual. She was just legitimately annoyed that I wasn't throwing strikes.
hilarious.
But these things shape us. You know, we observe them, we take them in, and they shape who we are. And so it's interesting to hear that your dad was driven, and that was part of his story of what made him successful, whether it was the cause or just a part of it.
Yeah. Does the throw strikes thing still come up in your adult life? Like, do you joke about it? Because I have a similar thing with my mom where we still reference this one word that happened when I was like, I don't know, 14. Does that still come up in your family?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like I play rec basketball now with old guys and played a game last night, and I can playfully engage with it. But before it was just this default inner voice of, oh, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? You could have been better in this way.
Sure.
Now I can recognize it a little more, you know, and it'll like miss a 3-point shot. And it's like, oh yeah, there you go. Missing your 3-point shots.
Yeah.
But it's more of like I can play with that inner piece of me that has the voice embedded in it.
Yeah.
I wonder how you experience that.
We play around with it too. So I had this one memory of when I was maybe a sophomore in high school. We had to build a little wooden boat, and then there was a marble catapult in the boat, and it had to reach the end of a certain body of water and then hit the edge, and the catapult was supposed to release this marble, and the marble was supposed to like hit a target. That was the goal for school. So at 3:00 in the morning, my mom hears downstairs like the sound in my bathtub, which was upstairs, and it's just ping, ping. And she comes upstairs. She's like, Jenny, it is the middle of the night. What are you doing? I'm like, I am so close to perfecting this catapult boat. And so we now, to this day, reference ping as a verb. Like, oh, Jenny, when I want this book and I wanted so badly for the book to do well in the first week and, hit the New York Times, she's like, Jenny, but I knew I shouldn't have had that goal because everyone says it's unproductive and it's so unhealthy and it'll crush your soul and all these things, and everyone is right. And I was like, Mom, I can't let go of this goal. She's like, I know, Jenny, you're just pinging it. I know. And you can't do anything but ping it even if you try. So we say it very playfully, but like that's our verb for when I do this thing, like, throwing strikes.
Yeah, yeah. And honestly, at that point, it just becomes a tool for awareness because you're not going to reshape the urge. It just creates the active choice and ability to choose. Yeah. I do want to get to the New York Times thing because we had a wonderful conversation about this at one point. But before we do, you had the storied career at Google, 18 years, tons of great work there. But there was a little chapter of your career before that I don't hear you talk about as much when you were doing research at Harvard Business School, I think focused on psychology. And I was fascinated by this because I hear you make references to studies and things that we know about the human brain in the context of work culture and performance at work. But I didn't know where it was coming from. And then I saw that and it was like, oh, I bet there's some roots there. So what was that period of your life like? I think it was 2 or 3 years that you spent there doing research.
That's right. Yeah. So that was my first job out of college. I was a research associate for 3 different professors. One, studying organizational behavior, how teams work, essentially. Number 2, technological substitution. So we looked a lot at like the move from VHS video to Laserdisc to DVD to digital. We made the call that digital will never take off. How hilarious is that? This was 2002. And my third year was, it's like so many years ago. Strategy was my third year. So it was strategy, organizational behavior, and technological substitution. Yeah. So like really good disciplines and pretty well-rounded and a ton of fun. I'm lying. 1 year was negotiations. It was leadership was part of organizational behavior. My third year was negotiations. And that was just so interesting. We studied lie detection in negotiations, and we used this game show that was only on the air for, I don't know, like a season called Friend or Foe, where people partnered together to answer trivia questions to achieve a certain amount of money. And then at the end, these partners would have to vote, do I think this person's a friend or a foe? They'd have to hit a secret button. Classic prisoner's dilemma. If they both hit friend, they'd split the pot. If one hit foe, or maybe you said, do I want to be a foe or do I want to be a friend? If you both hit foe, nobody got the money. If you hit foe, if you were the bad guy and the other person was the nice guy, you got all the money and vice versa. And so you tried to convince the other person that you were going to hit friend, so you'd split the pot. And so I coded hours and hours of footage of this video game to look for tells of lie detection in a negotiation, because it was a negotiation with your partner. And ultimately, we concluded that like the only tell is pupil dilation. That it's like if you talk about God or religion, or you talk about your partnership together, or you scratch your head, or you shrug your shoulders, or you cock your head one way, like none of that was correlated with truths or lies. It was only pupil dilation, which I don't even know how we would see that in the game show. But basically we said none of these other tells are true. Everything else is BS that we could observe from the footage.
Right. So you end up with physiological things, pupil dilation, heart rate,
exactly,
skin temperature, maybe things like that that you can't measure in that way.
Yeah. So we must have relied on other older bodies of research for that, but we were trying to negate the assumptions that like this wonky thing you do with your hand could be detecting, could be a tell for a lie.
Fascinating. This is the perfect story, because what I wanted to understand is, you see research associate at HBS and it's like, ooh, that's very nice and prestigious, has a perfect Enneagram 3 veneer to it.
Yes. But really, I'm just watching TV for a year.
Research is not always fun. Like the conclusions are interesting and it shares good learning, but it's that coding process that allows it to happen. And I find it interesting that you were using TV in that case, because my observation is that so often what's challenging about research studies at universities is that they're using student populations or populations that are immediately accessible in the university setting. And so it's many times not in the real world. And you got a real world example. Yeah.
Well, as unbiased as the contestants were on this game show.
Sure.
Right. But yeah, I think there was like decent, probably had an American bias. I think there was a decent spread of gender, race, etc. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then I love the teamwork and leadership research as well, where the conclusion there is at the end of the day, everybody wants to feel valued. It's like, how do you keep your employees happy? Let them feel valued.
And do it before they ask would be the thing I would add to that. The moment someone has to ask to feel like they're valued, they're not going to feel valued either way, in my experience.
Yeah.
This is interesting to me. I think that in our world, I'll call our world that we now inhabit together, although you still live, I know, in corporate world and keynotes and all of that. I think that creators maybe sometimes undervalue institutions and institutional learning like this, like research. I think there are some people that do it really well. I think Vanessa Van Edwards, I think, is a mutual friend. She's a great example of someone really who has built her career on research, but making it popular, accessible, understandable, and translating it.
Yes.
And it seems like you have carved a similar path here where you've been able to package ideas extraordinarily well and in a compelling way that gets people's attention. But it's also rooted in reality in so much as you can define reality through research. And I wonder what your relationship is to that, the root of reality, we'll call it, or data, and the packaging of compelling ideas and getting people's attention, and how you balance those things in your work.
I actually think I haven't balanced it that well. I wish that there were a lot more data and research in the book. I'm such a numbers person. I'm a data junkie. I'm a left brain thinker. I studied economics undergrad because they didn't offer a math major at my university. Like calculus was my favorite high school class. Accounting was my favorite college class. I wish that every second page was a research study. I think the book is a lot of me search, right? Like my own experiential learning and my own, which people love, right? Like people remember stories. If I had just like slapped the reader with like study after study and stat after stat, I don't know that people would find it sticky. So I think it's the right balance. But the things I regret about my book and the thing I'm working on for my keynote, I literally sent a voice memo to my keynote coach about this yesterday. I was like, I want more research. I want more numbers. I want more data and science in the keynote, because otherwise I feel like it's just fluff. And he wrote back, he's like, you have one of the least fluffy speeches I've ever worked on. He's like, you should see the other ones. I'm like, but is it hard hitting business facts enough? He's like, yes. So I would chalk this, I'm trying to ping it, as my mom would say, like trying to get every element. Is it funny enough? That's why I was looking at the Instagram videos. Is there enough data? Is it practical enough? Is it interactive enough? And so I admire that. I mean, I do think I tend to be pretty analytical. Like if I don't know, I answered a group chat today with some other authors and creators and entrepreneurs on it. And it's like, here are the 5 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with like numbers and stats and data in there. So it's just how my brain thinks. But I would actually be pretty harsh on myself and say that I don't think I have enough data and science-backed information in the book. I think it's a really fun read and people love the stories. So I don't think it was a bad choice, but I think it was not as conscious of a choice as it should have been. And I should have put a little bit more in there.
That's interesting. This is a great little micro macro moment right here, because here we are talking about the book itself. And I'm definitely making a cognitive leap, because when I read the book, I see all of the things you could have cited if you wanted to. There's so much you could have cited. No one reads the citations except for huge losers like me anyways. So I think that it does speak to a lot of things that we know could be cited without necessarily going and saying, here's my 33-page bibliography or whatever it might be. But what I find interesting is that this feels like, a micro example of the macro thing where you call it obsession.
Yeah.
Can be both productive and can also, I think, hold us back at times. And so rather than talking about the ways it's served you, which I think it's served you extremely well, I wonder how obsession holds you back at times.
Oh my gosh, all the time. So just to give context, so there are 9 traits of wild courage, and obsessed is trait number 4. Just to give context, the others are weird, selfish, shameless, nosy. We have obsessed, manipulative, brutal, reckless, and bossy, right? So they're all like spicy, obviously tongue-in-cheek, or obvious to me, maybe not obvious to the corporate decision makers who are like, we're not bringing her in to talk about being manipulative, but certainly intended to raise eyebrows, but wholesome at the core. So the invitation is to reclaim these words, not to take them literally, right? We're not manipulative, trying to harm people or be deceptive or deceitful. Manipulative to me is the courage to build lasting relationships through empathy. Obsessed is the courage to push, persist, perform at your highest ability, your highest level, frankly, not for some company, but for your own ambition, your own feeling of achievement, your own wanting to strike out the hitter, right? Every trait has trait traps, and trait traps are when you take the trait too far, all of these 9 traits. And obsessed is the one I absolutely take too far most often. So a couple examples, let's see. Okay, one is I once gave a talk. I was at Google, I was interviewing someone, and I spent so much time preparing. Like I worked with a media trainer, and she pushed me on 14 different dimensions, hands like this and asking questions like this, and don't ask double-barreled questions, and do emotional mapping. So you've got some parts of the questions that are like really engaging and some where you're a little more quiet and you kind of bring the audience in. And I had like so many things to think about, and I neglected my day job. All I could think about was prepping for this one public talk interview. And I finished the talk and she's like, how did it go? And I was like, I bombed. Or maybe my husband asked me, how did it go? I was like, I bombed. And then whoever this person was like pushed further and was like, well, what was the reaction? Did you get that feedback? I was like, no, the feedback was amazing. And so I think it was my husband actually. He's like, well, then what was the problem? And I was like, I didn't do all the things I intended to do. And to me, that was the failure. I was too obsessed with having to do every single one of these things, right? And replace anything that you're dealing with now, a project, an interview, a date, a move to a new city, and trying to get everything exactly right. Perfection is a mirage, right? Like progress is the only possibility. And so I just was trying to perfect everything. And I got a cold the next day. So I think that's one example where it's just like, yeah, I really fell into a trait trap of being obsessed and wanting to be an 11 out of 10, because you cannot be an 11 out of 10 on everything.
Yeah, it resonates with me for sure. As we've found through our friendship that we share a lot of these things in common. It's a great example. I think the example of trying to add more data to your presentation is probably another example.
For
you tell a
sure.
story in the book of leading a team meeting when you first became a manager of managers and doing all of the work on behalf of the team before ever having a conversation with them.
Yep. Huge leadership fail. Huge leadership fail.
Yeah, I want to come back around to that one. So I'm just going to drop that little seed there and we'll come back to it. But before we do, I want to, Google is this mythical beast in the world of startups and technology. Obviously, it's not a startup anymore. And I think many people of our general age range and generation viewed that as a very prestigious place to go to work, a place where smart and accomplished people go to work, where it's very difficult to make it through the interview process. And you got to work there for a very long time and be an important part of that organization. But I wonder what it was like the day that you showed up for the first time.
Oh.
And how the emotional ride was of that experience.
How was it when I showed up? Can I also talk about my last day?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, it was so long ago. It was 2006. It was a 10-person office, 10, 15, something like that. It was in a shared office space. Like you hear about these incredible slides and swings and rock climbing walls and arcades in the Google offices, when the bigger offices have those. But again, this is 2006. And so our quote unquote micro kitchen, which is where all the free food and free snacks is, was just someone going to Costco and getting like a bucket of Twizzlers. So I remember being like, wait, what? Have I been sold a bill of goods here? But just really intimidated, really intimidated. So much imposter syndrome. And I see this all the time with people who have just started at Google, right? People always think they've been hired as a mistake. And I coach them and say, the people who hired you have a lot of experience hiring. Who are you to be so arrogant to think that they made a mistake? They know what they're doing. And so I push back pretty hard on that. But honestly, that's how I felt. Like, am I going to make it here? And I would work super late nights. Like, it all goes back to throw strikes or ping it. How do I work extra hard to prove myself, which I've since learned is not the right way to approach life. But this is 26-year-old Jenny, fine. It's still pretty common for early career corporate people. I have this one moment where a mentee came to me and talked to me about how they had this bag of stuff packed under their desk and they refused to unpack it. And I was like, what's in the bag? And they're like, picture frames from my desk and a little bobblehead, little knickknacks. And I was like, why don't you unpack it? And she was like, I'm worried that I'm going to get laid off. And it'll be, what's that word? Superstitious. I kind of don't want to jinx it by unpacking my bag. And I'm like, unpack your effing bag. You belong here. So that to me is a really good allegory of, and this is what I call shameless, right? You have to be shameless. You have to push past that shame, push past that imposter syndrome, because shameless is finding your swagger. It's audacity. It's the courage to believe in your talents and your skills and your abilities and your growth mindset, because no one's hired knowing exactly what to do. Frankly, I hire people who have a great attitude and can show that they can learn something pretty quickly. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And someone who I look forward to meeting with each meeting. Everything else can be learned. And so I think that people just put so much pressure on themselves, as did I, aside from being like, what, we only get Twizzlers? Put so much pressure on myself in those first few weeks and months, thinking they made the wrong choice, just like these early career people I talk to all the time. And then also, how do I work extra hard to prove that I deserve to be here, versus trusting that I have the core goods of what it takes and that people hired me for that and that anything can be learned.
That mentee story is so good. There's a idea called anticipatory grief in the world, where we try and feel a thing before we've experienced it fully. So if you have a loved one who's ill and terminally ill, there's this process of almost pre-grieving their loss, even though they're still here.
Yeah.
I hear that story almost as anticipatory shame.
Yeah.
Like the day that I get laid off, I will have to pack all of these things up, carry a box of things out, and I will have to do that in front of all of my colleagues. And so therefore I better not put my bobblehead on my desk.
Yeah. I think that it sounds very similar to what I oftentimes refer to a social psychological principle called impact bias, which is when you think that a negative event might happen, your brain assumes that the negative event is going to last longer. The feeling, that bad feeling is going to last longer, and that it's going to be deeper than it ends up being. So like if you're worried about getting laid off, like we're talking about here, or fired, you think that the pain's going to be deeper and that the feeling of sadness, if you get laid off, is going to last a year. But then the layoff happens or whatever it is, or someone breaks up with you, or you have to, whatever XYZ negative event, someone passes away, and it ends up, research suggests, being much, much quicker. Maybe it only lasts 3 weeks and you're back on your feet. And it's not nearly as deep as that anticipation as you're just describing. So I refer to that as impact bias. They've got to be sister concepts.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's a affirmative version of this too that I see observationally in my me search, as you put it, with my clients. That is this idea that if I make $1 million, or I hit this number in my bank account, or I achieve this number of followers, or my book hits the New York Times bestseller list, that everything will then change.
Oh my gosh.
And this is deeply disappointing to people in the opposite direction, because I am not an inflammatory social media person. I don't believe in triggering people. The most triggering thing I ever said, this was before I had ever made even close to this amount of money. I said, if you think $1 million is going to change your life, I have bad news for you. You probably have to get up and go to work the next week anyways.
Right.
Oh man, people got mad at me. Oh, you're so privileged and blah, blah, blah. I didn't have any money at that. I was in like debt when I tweeted it. But it was actually a self-reflection that I caught myself thinking, oh, if I just made $1 million, but if you do the math on a thing like that, it's like, well, no, not really. It's like you have a nice little nest egg and then you got to figure out what's next.
Yeah. Well, this is my big pivot now, is just like, what do I want to be optimizing for? Because I optimized for money for so many years of my life and got really, really stuck in drive mode. I know that when Mo Bundle was on the show, you had this wonderful episode where Mo and you talked about drift, drive, and design. And I'm really trying to focus on the design now, because I think I was in a combination of drift and drive. I think the drive created the drift, and it was so much focused on security versus enhancement and the financial security. I'm the breadwinner for my family and always put a lot of pressure on myself, and also frankly loved what I did. I loved leading teams at Google, right? I loved the problems we were solving. I loved the program that I created that ended up being used by 56,000 people in almost 100 countries. Like, I had incredible pride around it, around all of it. But at the root, my fear of leaving Google was about money. Mostly that. A little bit of identity, but I'm a Googler. Who am I if not a Googler? Which now I look back on that, and I've only been gone about a year, but like I laugh at that. And then my relationship to money was just really, it still is really tricky, but it was really hard at the time. And it took a lot of kind of untangling through deep work and help from financial advisors, therapists, coaching, etc. But now I feel like I'm in this phase of enhancement, and it is so much more fun and so much healthier. We've got some big plans for in the next few years, which you don't even know about, Barrett. We know each other a little bit, but I'll share. I'll dish.
This is perfect. Okay, so before we get there, though, I want to kind of set the table for how the book came to be and your departure from Google. So my understanding is basically you had been there a very long time. You had reached kind of the executive level. You were a manager of managers. You had started this internal career program that felt like this big leap to propose something that you thought could make a difference. And it did, as you just referenced, served tens of thousands of people with it. And out of all of this, you're very good at developing frameworks out of the things that you experience.
Yeah.
And I think the framework for this book started to develop in your mind. You ended up selling it as a concept to a traditional publisher, which is like a huge deal. And you ended up in this conundrum, as I experience it, of, oh shit. So now I have a job, I have a side job within my job, and now I have a book. And as I understand it, this led to this feeling of almost being trapped. And I don't want that to sound overly negative, but this golden handcuff kind of feeling of anxiety and sleeplessness, and what am I going to do with all of this, and where do I go? So take us back to that kind of period of time and what it felt like when you were right in the middle of the morass of all of that.
Hardest period of my life. I was sick. I was truly sick, Barrett. I was emotionally sick. I was mentally sick. I was physically sick. I was addicted to sleep medication. Trazodone was my drug of choice. And I was oftentimes up between 2 and 5 a.m. because you're right. Like I had developed this program called Own Your Career. The book is different concepts, different frameworks. But what that taught me was that I had this desire to help coach people to be better than they think they could be. And I realized I liked that even more than my operations role that sat between sales and engineering, even though I loved these, global teams that I ran and I had so much pride in everything I was doing. I felt like I had my core job, my operations role. I was running the Own Your Career program. I had the potential of all this stuff outside of Google, right? Like conversations around book deals and all this stuff. I was a wife, job number 4, and I was a mom, job number 5. So I had these 5 competing roles, all of which could absolutely be a full-time job. And because of my drive mode, because of wanting to ping it, because of, wanting to be obsessed and be good at all of them, I just started to crumble. And there were a couple like key moments, all due to sleep deprivation, by the way, which was from what I call lowercase a anxiety. And I fell running in the mountains. We live in Boulder, Colorado. I try to hike/run every day, trail run. And I slept on a rock. I hit my head on a rock. And it was like clearly directly correlated to not having slept enough the night before. There was a moment where I was driving my son home from choir. It's about an hour drive. It was dark, windy, kind of foothills, mountain roads. And I realized that my eyes had just like sort of almost maybe fluttered closed. And I don't think I didn't fall asleep at the wheel, Barrett, but I was like, did I just almost fall asleep at the wheel? And heard like my tire hit like the rumble, on the side that like keeps you on track. And then just like a lot of deep-seated sadness. And it was just so hard to figure out what the heck to do because I was caught in what I call truths and tales. Like truths are verifiable facts. Like this is a pen, right? This is a red pen. And you and I can agree on that. But the tale is the story you create around the red pen that doesn't always serve you, right? That might create doubt or worry or fear. So let's say my tale for this pen is it might explode all over my hand. Ink is going to be running down my hand. I'm wearing this white jean jacket. It's going to ruin the jean jacket. It's going to ruin this interview. And it's going to get ink all over my laptop, ruin my whole business, right? And so I had all these truths versus tales that I was struggling with. Let me start with the tales. Tale, I will have no identity if I leave Google. But what was the truth there that helped me eventually leave? Like this was the work I had to do. The truth was I have other identities that I could adopt, right? It's only one part of who I am.
It pings back so easily to the first day thing of like what makes you Jenny wasn't Google. What makes you Jenny was what made Google want you. And that was going to exist in Google or out of Google.
Yes. And
right, those traits would.
Sure. And lots of people told me that, Barrett.
Yeah, for sure. You can't hear it at the time.
One person, we've got my father-in-law who says, I'll never bet against you. We've got a fellow exec at Google. We were hiking one day. She says, Jenny, I don't care what you are doing or selling. I will buy stock in you. Oh, and then another friend who's a very successful business owner said, you were the only, recently I said, business is going really well. I'm shocked. He's like, you're the only one who's shocked, Jenny. Nobody else is surprised. He's like, you just couldn't believe it. You couldn't see it yet. Now, where this comes from, Barrett, like it's so messed up. Why can't I just trust and enjoy and deeply believe that I will be successful and that I will be able to pay my mortgage? I mean, let's go back to the truths and tales, right? Tale, I literally said we won't be able to move our mortgage. I was looking at houses on the other side of Broadway, which is the street that separates kind of the nicer houses from the, more budget houses. And I was like, okay, so we'll move. We'll have to move. We won't be by all these hiking trails that I love so much, within walking distance. But then I, tried to pull it back and identify, well, what's the core truth there, the verifiable fact? I simply won't get a paycheck from Google with the logo on it every 2 weeks. Another tale, my parents will judge me as the breadwinner for my family and think that I've made a poor decision, right? Raise your hand if you're listening, if you're over the age of 30, I'm 45, and you still care about what your parents think of you. My hand is really high, right? Like I haven't grown up in that way enough. And so that was a voice just on repeat in my head. But then the truth, my parents have always believed in me and always said, Jenny, you've got a great track record. It's not like there was this, I guess, kind of that driving my son home from choir moment where I was like, what am I doing? I can't live like this. Nothing is this important. And it was the kind of heart attack, fainting in the office moment, right? I mean, those things didn't actually happen, but those ones you hear about where it's like, you've got to check yourself before you wreck yourself. And here we are. But it was really, really, really hard. And that's why when I say that my last day at Google is a lot more visceral than my first day, it's because I've got this picture of me in the Google lobby with the Google logo behind me. And I'm like looking all smiley and happy. I've got this black t-shirt on and this paisley colored skirt. I can picture it really easily. And I look happy and content. And then I get into my car after that picture is taken and I close the door and tears just start streaming down my face because I'm terrified. I am terrified of the risk, of the failure, of how to approach life as an entrepreneur. Terrified have I just left this really, really comfortable, lucrative leadership position at Google where I have so much pride and ownership and respect and money to go be a starving artist, like to go write a book? What am I doing? And it's funny to look back on it because I wish I could take that girl and shake her and say, Jenny, this is what wild courage is about. It's about pushing past 3 fears: fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, and fear of judgment by others. That's it. Fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, and fear of judgment by others. And yet here I was struggling so hard to push past my own fears. And yet had I stayed at Google, I would have been a total fraud because how can I tell a story about wild courage if I'm just going to stay in the same job for 18 more years? I literally thought I would be at Google for 18 more years. This was not in my plan.
That is hell for a planner.
Yeah.
I so vividly remember, I think our first in-depth conversation sitting around a fire pit at an entrepreneur's retreat in Atlanta and essentially having this conversation about what it was like to leave, all of the uncertainty, what it was going to be like to speak and continue to speak and coach and let the business continue to blossom in whatever way it's supposed to. And I think I want to kind of end the first half of our conversation with acknowledging these parts of you that want a spreadsheet and a plan and a plus minus checklist and the logical best answer to everything. And in this case, the parts of you that there was like a felt sense that something had to change is what I hear from you.
Yeah.
And what allowed you to lean into that, knowing that there wasn't the spreadsheet yet. There wasn't all of these other things that normally you would lean into. And you had to kind of like take a proverbial leap of faith, to be totally lame about it. But you really had to lean into the unknowns and the uncertainty and all of the possibility in that rather than your typical tools. What was that like?
Hard, scary, against my nature. The concept of the body keeps the score is so real though. And so when my eyes were closing and my head was hitting a rock, and how can you logic your way out of that? You can't. I didn't want to hurt myself more. I didn't want to put myself in a position where I was still so deeply anxious and stressed and sleep deprived and scared, because it was also scary doing this all at Google, right? Like there was just like so much that was happening, and I'm not one to simplify. I am not one to simplify. Give me a challenge and I'll sink my teeth into it. Funnily enough, my word for the business for this year is simplify, or simplicity, I think we picked. But I almost felt like I had no choice. And that was scary too, because it's like, well, wait, no, I always have agency. So I did feel a little bit out of control. And actually, Barrett, I don't even know if I realized at the time how sick I was. Like, oh, you can push through anything, right? Whatever. So I take a little trazodone each night. No big deal. Who doesn't, right? Like, sleep's important. If you need to take a little sleep aid, take a sleep aid. But the next day, my eye would be twitching and my thigh would be twitching. Like, I'm really sensitive to medication. And then I'd have to like keep dialing it up and dialing it up and dialing it up to still have the same impact. And I was like, oh, this isn't great. But I also would really rationalize my way out of it. I love this line Dan Pink has from the book, The Power of Regret. He says, rationalization is so powerful, it should require a background check. Rationalization is so powerful, it should require a background check. And I was just rationalizing the hell out of everything. I can do this. I've got this. I'll pull back a little bit here. I'll lean in a little bit there. A well-balanced life doesn't mean a well-balanced year. But really, at the end of the day, I was sick.
So when you sat down to let your teams know or let your manager know that you were leaving, what was that like? And what led you to the courage to finally have the conversation?
I didn't want to live like that anymore. And 7 conversations with our financial advisor. So again, like, money was a huge fear of mine, which was irrational. I had a tech salary for 18 years, Barrett, and yet I wasn't going to leave Google because I'd only ever seen my net assets go up and to the right and thought that the amount of money that I was making was the amount that I needed to make each year. So it was actually not until we did our, forward-looking financial plan and I realized like, okay, wait, so even if I make a third of what I'm making, even if I make nothing my first year, and again, we're getting back into logic, Barrett, but this is who I am, so I can't deny it. Even if I make nothing my first year and a morsel of what I make at Google my second year and a slightly big morsel the third year, this is doable. And so, Jenny, you've got to push past the fear. And then I also thought about how to break down risk into 4 parts and not just think about risk as a holistic thing. Because I think of risk in 4 ways: financial risk, physical risk, emotional risk, and mental risk. And I sat down with a spreadsheet, classic, and I ranked myself 1 to 5 on each of those dimensions. And I realized that the risk of staying at Google was actually a lot higher in some of those dimensions than I would have thought. Like mental risk, honestly, the stress of trying to do it all was crippling to me. And the amount that I would learn as an entrepreneur, like that would be so richly fulfilling mentally as a writer, as a keynote speaker, as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, as a small business leader, like there was so much more to learn. So the risk was actually higher to stay at Google on that. Emotional risk, again, we've talked about that a lot. I think there was so much people pleasing that was going on, much higher risk at Google than outside. Financial risk, even that wasn't as high as I thought. Physical risk, higher to stay at Google because of what was happening with my body and the sleep deprivation and injuring myself. So, that was another way. I think maybe that was one of the moments where I was like, when the numbers told me, again, as someone who was horrific at listening to my body and my gut and what's going on the inside, but pretty good at making a spreadsheet and seeing what the numbers say, that analysis also helped me finally walk into my boss's office and say, I'm done. I'm done.
So what I hear in this, well, there's so much I hear in this, but your newsletter is called Big Small Things. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Big Small Things. And you talk about this in terms of leading, managing, performing well at work. And what I see in this that reflects my work with my coaching clients is it's the same type of big, small things that allow you to build a new sense of safety in what previously felt uncertain or undefined. And so I hear you saying, my body was telling me unequivocally, I could not do both.
Yeah.
You had already chosen your path. I mean, you had already chosen the path of author, speaker. You just hadn't lived into it yet, right?
Fair. Like I was loving that type of work so much.
And so you were already on the way and your body was telling you that was the way you needed to go. Also, there was still the rational brain that needed to get on board. And so what I hear you doing in the financial conversations and the spreadsheets is recruiting all of those same tools to give you this sense of small safety enough to take the risk and say, all right, I just need enough safety for the first step. And then I need enough safety for the next one. And then it's built on itself over time.
Yeah, that's true. And then, each day that's successful, it gets that confidence back up because I left strangely feeling crushed. Like despite the fact that I left on a high in my career at Google, I left, with so much excitement around book deal and a really amazing team that could help me on the outside, or, knowing that I could create that team and knowing exactly who I wanted to pluck and like pick the A players for every component of running this business, I still felt so incredibly crushed and defeated and demotivated. And I think that's not so different from that story where I said I got caught in the obsessed trait trap, where objectively everyone was like, that talk was awesome. Wasn't that talk awesome? And I was like, no, it was terrible. It's sort of like, your 18 years at Google were awesome. Don't you feel awesome? You've got all this opportunity ahead of you. And I'm like, no, I feel miserable. And so I had to rebuild. I had to rebuild physically. I had to rebuild emotionally. I had to rebuild mentally. And then I fooled myself financially. Rather than saying I want to make X, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, I brought that way down to fool myself, to just put less pressure on myself because that anxiety was hurting my business. It was affecting how I'd show up to a pitch call. It was like oozing stress out of my ears when I would be talking to a potential corporate partner. And I had to actually fool myself and give myself a fake revenue target so that I would chill the F out.
I love it. Okay, we're going to take a break here and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about chasing the New York Times bestseller list, what you learned from that. We're going to talk about this positively obsessive list that you talked about with filming speaker reels and what that represents, and how you have started to build this business and speaking, coaching, and everything that might be coming that I don't yet know. So that's what people can look forward to. Hey, If you're listening to this and you're already successful as an entrepreneur, you built something meaningful, you're making real money, people depend on you, but internally it still feels heavier than it should, I want to talk to you for a moment. Most of the creators and founders I work with are already at 7 figures in revenue or well on their way. They don't need more tactics. They don't need me to tell them what to do. But what they're wrestling with is something much deeper. It's the psychological weight of leadership, the loneliness of success, the subtle avoidance patterns that creep back in when the stakes get high, and the question of who they need to become next for their business and their life to actually work for them. My one-to-one coaching is built around that inner journey of outward success. We work at the level of identity, nervous system, emotional patterns, and leadership, not just strategy or tactics, so you can lead with more clarity, less friction, and a lot more sustainability. I keep a very small coaching roster so the work can remain deep and personal and connected always. So if you're a creator or a founder at an inflection point where what got you here isn't enough anymore, I'd love for you to apply to work together at barrettbrooks.com/coaching. I've heard that even the application itself tends to bring a little bit more clarity. Again, you can find that at barrettbrooks.com/coaching. I'd love the chance to have a conversation about working together. Hey, during this little break in the action here, I want to tell you about a weekly email I write called Little Leadership Lessons and why so many entrepreneurs tell me it's the one email they always read. Every issue I write is built from a real coaching conversation with a high-performing creator or founder. I start with the situation they're facing, a decision, a tension point, or a moment that they felt stuck. Then we dive into the emotional blocker that's underneath that situation, the fear, the pressure, the identity friction that's quietly driving the problem. From there comes the breakthrough, the deeper insight that changes how they see themselves and their work. And then lastly, I leave you with a few coaching questions that you can apply directly to your own life and business. It's designed to feel like a calm, 5-minute coaching session delivered every week. Not noise, not hype, not productivity theater, just clarity and calm, you and your business. So if you're an entrepreneur or a creator who wants to grow without losing yourself in the process, you can subscribe to Little Leadership Lessons at barrettbrooks.com right at the top. That's barrettbrooks.com, and of course, it's free. We haven't really touched on the real life background part of all of this. You know, you mentioned you're a mom, you mentioned being in the car with your son, but you are not a passive mom. I don't perceive you as passive in any aspect of your life. And so talk to me about this journey to becoming parents and what it's been like to carry the role of mother throughout this whole story we've been talking about.
Yeah, I would classify myself as having been a passive parent for the past 10 years. And this is actually really cool and something that excites me to talk about because I remember having a conversation with someone where I said, while I was still at Google, I feel so much mom guilt. Like I work until 6 or 7 o'clock. It's sort of like the typical guy role, right? Who's like at the big fancy company, you know, McKinsey, and travels Monday through Thursday and is always gone. And mom puts the kids to bed and dad's gone, but that's fine. He's making the money. Nobody cares, or like it's the societal norm. And I said, I sort of feel like that. And that I just, some days I don't even see my kids, or I see them for, you know, like 30 minutes or an hour. And I have so much guilt around it. And this person challenged me and said, so do you want to be a stay-at-home mom? And I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? I would never be happy as a stay-at-home mom. And she was like, do you love your job? I was like, oh, like you can't believe I love my job. And she's like, I mean, do you see your kids sometimes? And I was like, yeah, of course I see them sometimes. I'm being so hard on myself. She's like, radical acceptance, Jenny. Enjoy your job. Enjoy the gifts you give to your team and to like the world and how you impact people. And let that shit go. And I was like, it seems so simple, but it was such a profound conversation to me. And it was really helpful. And then I left Google. And then I went through that same cycle again, where I work from home now. So I couldn't work, quote unquote. I couldn't stay at the office until 6 or 7 o'clock at night trying to get everything done because I have 11 meetings back to back at Google. And then I try to get the real work done or do some of it at the office and then some when the kids go to bed. And so I realized launching a book is a crippling amount of work. And I was like, holy crap, my day ends at 2:50 when the kids get out of school. And I never got a workspace or an office outside of the home, which I suppose I could have. But I was like, I had so much anxiety around the fact that I now only had 7 hours to work, 7:50 to 2:50 when my kids were in school. And I was like, I can't build a business this way. This is not doable. This is a recipe for disaster. And there's no way that I will be successful and achieve these revenue goals and be able to pay the mortgage, pay for vacations, buy groceries, pay for gymnastics and singing and jump rope team that my kids are on if I am stopping work at 2:30 every day. Like, I'm not on the mom track. Like, this is not my design. I'm going big here if I'm going to leave and do this, or, now that I've left and done this. Okay, so fast forward, the book came out 10 months ago. And I finish work every day at 2:40 and I walk down the hill to school and I pick up my 3rd and 5th grader from school, and I don't work Mondays, Barrett. And I've never been happier, but I could not see that identity. I could not see that as a possibility. To me, that just seemed like something to be scared of. And now it's something I so deeply celebrate. And I talked to someone at Google yesterday who has big things going on outside of work and would have tremendous success if they left. And she was like, I have no intention to leave because this is how I pay my mortgage. And this person doesn't have kids. And I think you also have young kids, right? And so it made me sad actually for myself that I spent so many years thinking that I couldn't optimize differently, which, by the way, is what I call the brutal trait. That is the courage to ruthlessly prioritize. It's the power of no. It's the power of saying, no, I don't have to work until 7. I don't have to people please, because people pleasing keeps you small. And ruthlessly prioritizing, being brutal about your calendar, about your choices, about the hours you work, the days you work, will always serve you.
That's really beautiful, actually, that's been part of this transition that you didn't anticipate and didn't even know you wanted.
Didn't even know I want. Actively thought I didn't want it. How
has it changed your relationship to your kids?
Oh my gosh, it is night and day. First of all, my son has historically struggled a lot, and he's matured. His prefrontal cortex is developing. He has really severe ADHD. He's got a great support system. We've got meds, in the right place. And mom is way more present in his life now. And he's doing great. And that can only be a good thing. There's this stat that by the time your kids go to college, you will have spent 90% of the time with them that you will ever spend with them. And it haunts me. It doesn't haunt me anymore, actually. In this transition period, it began to haunt me. And I was like, what choices am I making? How am I being brutal? How am I voting with my calendar? Because at this point, my daughter is 8, my son is 10. And I feel like I've, again, being really, really negative against myself, because this is a bit of hyperbole, but these are the words that I would say to myself. I've missed the first half of their childhood. What choice do I want to make for the second half?
Ping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I can relate to this. I have these really tender moments sometimes, usually around milestones or transitions. So school starting or holiday season ending, where I'll do this thing where it's like, that was the 6th of 18 summers we get.
Mm-hmm.
And the 6th of probably 14 maybe that they're going to care to be around us. 14 if we're lucky.
Sure.
Or, same thing with holiday season. Oh man, we're out of baby phase. There's no more baby holiday seasons and things like this. So I just noticed that, and really, I try not to go all the way into the far melodramatic end of that where I can get sucked into it, but really honoring that, we are, and you using it for a steadying force.
Or saying, this is the last time I will X, right? And sometimes you don't know. You don't know, this is the last time I will read my son a bedtime story, or this is a funny example, but the other day, my daughter was she went to the bathroom and I was like, I haven't wiped her butt in years. I was like, you never know. You don't know when the last time you're going to wipe her butt will be, right? Or my son the other night, he's like, Mom, don't kiss me anymore. And I was like, don't kiss you anymore? He's like, well, yes on the forehead, but that's it. I was like, wow, you don't know. Or, I walked my kids to school the other day and my son was like, can you just stay at the top of the hill and not walk me all the way to the door, Mom? It's so embarrassing. And again, you don't know when the last time is that you'll walk your son or your daughter to the front door of the school. It's sad to me that I couldn't see it like this before. I looked down on stay-at-home moms. And if there are stay-at-home moms listening, I'm so sorry. And maybe it was jealousy. Maybe it was part jealousy, because I guess in the I actually thought I would always be a stay-at-home mom when I was a kid. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. That was my model. But then as soon as I met my husband and we started dating, it was very clear that I was like the hard-charging businesswoman, that he was like the incredible husband and father and funny and wonderful and kind and empathetic, and that I was going to be the one who was likely making the lion's share of the money, and he was going to add so much other value to the relationship and to our family, to our kids. So maybe it was, when I met him when I was 30, that it became unrealistic for me to stay at home mom. So maybe it's jealousy. Maybe it was like, that would be so fun to dive all the way into that. But I do now at this point look back and judge myself for working so hard and not figuring out a way to have better life design.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's beautiful that if we take the full arc from miscarriage to therapy to reorient around what you all wanted to hard charging, hard working, this is my path, mom at Google, to now still hard charging, still hard working in a new way, but also present for the kids. It's just such a cool, I don't think there's any right way to do any of this, but it's cool that you've landed on the balance that gives you both, but it doesn't require you, like you say, to be a smaller version of you professionally.
Yeah.
Like in many ways, I think you're bigger than ever.
Sure. And I am living in way less fear about money because now I believe that I can make a living doing this.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this piece of things. We were at this event called Mashup last October. You have a wonderful kind of behind the scenes view of what it was like to chase New York Times bestseller status. And we had this fantastic conversation over lunch. Mm-hmm. And what I noticed in this entire framing, and you did it earlier in the conversation actually, which was perfect, was this almost like you weren't fully embodying the shamelessness of the thing, where it was a little bit apologetic of like, yeah, I did it. I know I wasn't supposed to. I know everyone said it wouldn't matter. I know this and that and that and that and that. And I just said at lunch, I was like, I think it mattered.
Yeah.
I think it really mattered. So talk about that chase and what it meant to you and now how you look back at it.
Well, you fundamentally changed my perspective in not just that conversation, but something that had happened an hour earlier prior to that, which was you were doing a live coaching of another colleague, another fellow entrepreneur there, and you emphasized the importance of celebrating the wins. And I was like, holy crap, I just did an hour talk in front of all these people. I'd been asked to do a talk about how to hit the New York Times or just about successful book launches. And I led with so much shame, like you were just saying. It was a waste of time. It was expensive. It took a lot of energy and effort. And, it nearly broke me. Are we sensing a theme? It nearly broke me. And I survived. It's like, I'm Jewish. We say at Passover, what's the moral of every Jewish holiday? They tried to kill us. We won. Let's eat. And so I feel like the theme of this podcast is like, it almost broke me. It didn't. Let's keep talking, right?
Yeah.
So I think it was you holding that mirror up to it and saying, why don't you just celebrate? How I interpreted it was, why don't you just celebrate it? Like, you did a big thing. You achieved it. You got it. It's the Emmy of books. It's the Oscar of books. That fundamentally changed my perspective. But yes, everyone says, don't go for it. It's editorialized. It's so much effort and it's just out of your control. But I refuse to believe that. And I think a lot of it was in my control. I treated my book launch like as if I were leading a massive team at Google, because I think a lot of first-time authors go in scared and with so much imposter syndrome, which I had all that. No, I definitely had that. I had this pivot 2 years into the process where I was like, wait a second, I have to lead these people. Like, I have to inspire them. I've got to get them pumped. I've got to give them deadlines. And when I say these people, I'm talking my chief of staff, the publisher, my editor, my agent, my marketers, my PR people. Like, there were nearly 40 people working on this book launch, not in a full-time capacity, including 6 interns. Yeah. And rather than just like sitting by and waiting for this launch to happen to me, I was like, wait a second. I'm sensing that no one's really taking the reins here. I've got to grab the reins and drive. And so I did. And then I drove really hard. And I spent a full year not running a business, but running a book launch. Like, that was my business. Any keynote I did, I traded for bulk book sales. I didn't have a coaching practice. I fell into the coaching business, by the way. Like, that was never, ever intended to be a revenue pillar for me. And now it's a third of my revenue. And I deeply, deeply love it. I went all in, full tilt on this book launch. And what you helped me realize was celebrate that. Celebrate the success, celebrate the intentionality, celebrate the goal, celebrate the achievement. And now I can see it differently. And someone on the team who was an audience member when I did that talk where I was like, I shouldn't have done it, here's why you shouldn't do it. I thought I was being helpful to people. I thought I was saving people from themselves. And then she came up to me afterwards and she said, I found that really disappointing because I worked really hard on your book launch. And it was demotivating to me to hear that you weren't as pumped as I was about achieving that goal.
How did that land with you?
Oh, game changing for me. Because at the end of the day, someone else feeling successful is the whole reason I do this work. My goal, I said it earlier, is to coach people to be better than they think they can be. My goal is to get them excited, get them feeling confident, get them feeling like they can achieve huge things, to live their greatest potential, to get the promotion, to get the raise, to change roles within your company, outside of your company, to be a better leader, to be a better listener. And my goal is to make people feel good, happy, satisfied, and successful. And so for her to say that I had hindered that just in the way I was presenting this book launch that she worked so hard on was pretty profound.
Yeah, that's a great story. I mean, I celebrate it. I think it's awesome that you said, this is my goal. I hear the posture shift in you. It's like a leaning back, waiting to be led, and then saying, oh shit, I just trained for 18 years on all of the skills I need to lead all of these people to this thing. It's basically a product launch.
It was straight up a product launch, Barrett. Straight up a product launch.
And you had the playbook for that.
Yes.
And it worked.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting about the conversation with you and the conversation with this other person who was on my team is we all know that we can choose what we believe, right? We all know that our biggest critic is inside of us. We all know that going back to truths and tales, which is a great way to be more shameless and to be more reckless, like me leaving Google, we know that these things matter. And so I rewrote my script after that moment. And now I think of Hitting the Times as this incredible thing. Like it happened in a flash, in two conversations, the one with you and the one with his team member. And I now think it's totally badass and that it was so worthwhile and that I will milk that shit till the day I die to get 10% more on every speaking gig and to get the next client and to keep raising my prices. Like I will milk it and leverage it like you cannot imagine, because why the F not?
I love that so much. It's perfect. That's such in the spirit of your own philosophy, that posture towards it.
Yeah.
So much reflective of what you teach.
And what's so cool is like, you really can choose. You really can choose what you believe. And when I believe like it wasn't worth it, what a waste, I want to shield anybody from, the expense and the energy investment and the time and the stress and the fact that I was worried my kids were going to divorce me, right, for the last few years. I just shifted it. I was very proud of myself for being able to then settle into the celebration of it.
Okay, so this feels like a good moment to bring in a story that you mentioned earlier, which was that when your book came out, we must have had, I think we were trying to count, we must have had at least a half dozen, maybe 10 people say, you have to meet each other for like a year. And that started happening for me back when the book was coming out. Multiple mutual friends said, oh, you got to meet Jenny. Your publicist reached out. You got to have Jenny on the show. So tell the story of the long arc of how we ended up here on having this conversation.
Okay, so you had a lot of people saying that to you. I probably had a lot of people saying that to me too, but I was in such a book launch tizzy, it did not stick. So all I saw, and I was doing at this point like many podcasts a week, I don't know, up to like 3 a day sometimes, not every day certainly, but I see this, I look at my week on a Sunday and I look at like my podcast schedule and I'm like, who is this joker who thinks that we're going to do a 2-hour podcast? I immediately text my chief of staff, Carolina, with a screenshot. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but I'm not doing a 2-hour podcast. Yeah, like hard pass. I was like, this is just really bad ROI on my time. Like that's 2 podcasts right there. Why would I only do 1 in that time slot? And so we cancel it. Like not a question, didn't think about who you were or if anybody had ever mentioned your name. Fast forward, we get to this entrepreneur's small mastermind. And certainly in that moment, this was several months ago now, I show up and everyone's like, all I hear is Barrett Brooks. Jenny, have you talked to Barrett Brooks? You know Barrett Brooks, right? And I was like, no, but I keep hearing his name and I am so pumped to meet him. So I make a beeline for you. And we have that conversation by the fire pit. And then the next day, I actually felt really guilty to talk about people pleasing and needing to be shameless and brutal about your time and how you vote with your calendar. I went to this one session, which was during the session that you were doing at the same time where you were going to be doing some live coaching. And I was like, I felt so bad walking out of this other session, but all I wanted in my gut, this was a time where I listened to my body, was to be listening to you do live coaching. So I stand up in the middle of this other guy's session. I walk out, I sit down in your session. It was like the most useful part of the conference. And I'm like obsessed with you at this point. Okay. And so then is lunch. And I'm like, I just want to sit next to Barrett and gain more of his wisdom. And man, how cool would it be if I could be on his show? I could not imagine, like, if he just asked me to be a guest on his show, I would melt. So we sit down to lunch, as I remember it, maybe slightly differently for you. We have a really nice lunch, meaningful conversation. We talk about the celebrating the New York Times thing, another, mic drop, aha, profound moment from you. And then I muster my wild courage and I'm like, Barrett, I don't want to overstep, but wild courage is about being selfish and shameless and reckless. So I'm going to ask, would you be open to having me on your show? And your response, as I recall it, was, I tried and you canceled on me. And I was like, what? And I sure enough look at my inbox and there the whole thing unfolds. I had no idea. And I'm so grateful to be here. So that's my recalling of the story. I don't know if it was slightly different for you.
That's pretty much it. It was great. And I totally get it. I usually don't even do recordings in book launch windows for partially this reason. I like to be either in the pre-launch window or after.
Yeah. I was in such a tizzy. And by the way, the depth of the conversation would have been, I'm not saying that today's conversation is so deep, but I wouldn't have had the presence of mind to have like a real human conversation. And I would consider this like a deeper human conversation than my book talking points, which is what I was spewing out 3 times a day during those weeks leading up.
As you should when you're trying to accomplish exactly what you were. Right. And so on my end, it was like, I think your chief of staff reached out and said, hey, could we do a shorter version? And I had just gotten used to that at that point. And I said, thanks so much. I'd love to have Jenny on anytime. It makes total sense to me that with the travel and the book launch, like she's probably super stressed and we don't have to do it right now. I don't compromise on length because it's the point. I want to be able to meander and connect and all of that. Basically like, hey, reach out if you want to do it in the future. And I figured I just don't take these things personally at this point. It's like, look, everyone's got goals. It's not a big deal. I'll be here when you're ready.
Yeah.
So fast forward, we're at lunch and you mentioned like, I think the added line you had was like, I was sitting here wondering, is this an appropriate setting to say I would like to record a podcast?
Great. Perfect.
And I was like, yeah, this is great. I was thinking the same thing. We should totally do it. By the way, we did book once upon a time. And you sat there and you were like, oh my God, I have to go find the email now. And you like searched your inbox until you found it.
Not that I didn't believe you, but I had no recollection or no association with that cancellation, which I totally remembered. The 2-hour podcast we canceled, but I had no idea it was you. So it was funny.
Yeah, it's great. I think you were doing exactly what you needed to and ended up being perfect timing now. Okay, so now here we are. You've left Google. You do have a New York Times best-selling book. You do have a business. You are, in fact, earning money.
Yeah.
What's going on today? How are you earning a living? And what's this little like thing you sprinkled out there that might be coming down the pike?
The thing that I sprinkled is so fun and a bit of a callback to by the time your kids go to college, you have spent 90% of the time you'll ever spend with them. So, all right, so what am I doing now? 2/3 of my revenue is keynotes. I work with executives. I work with large groups, 1,500, 2,000 people doing keynotes. It's so much fun, Barrett. I'll take 3 traits and I'll go deep on those 3 traits. These days it's been brutal around ruthless prioritization, shameless around pushing past imposter syndrome, and reckless around the courage to err on the side of action and take healthy risks. Because I deeply believe, and we talked about this a lot, better to learn from your mistakes than waste time debating the outcome of every possible situation. Think fast and fearless, and if you're on the fence, do it. And that's what I learned by leaving Google. So those are the topics I go deep on. And then I do one-on-one coaching, which I said I would never do because it doesn't scale, but man, do I love it, love it, love it. And if you charge enough, it scales. So it's a lot of fun. And I thought about bringing on coaches under me. I was thinking about just reaching out to you as a friend to talk about that. And now with the motto of the year being simplicity, I don't think I'm going to do it because I said I'm not going to launch a course this year. I'm not going to launch a community. We are going to be doing some more brand sponsorship deals. And my husband, who just left his job, is going to be heading that up in addition to pitching keynotes proactively. Even though to me it was obvious that like launching a course this year would go against simplicity and launching a community would go against simplicity. And I said, it'll be pretty simple to just bring coaches on under me. But then I thought about it more and nothing is simple, right? No big business pivot or business move is simple. You've got IP things to think about. You've got contracts. You've got lifetime deals or referral fees, right? You've got to figure out the revenue split. You've got to figure out coaching. What are your frameworks? And I was just like, you know what? I love the one-on-one coaching. So for now, that's what I'm doing. And there's some consulting in there too with companies too, around leadership, around organizational behavior, around peak performance, around team dynamics, thriving, not just surviving and change. So sometimes when I do a keynote, it also ends up being a consulting partnership. What I'm really, really excited about is that 18 months from now, we are going to take the kids out of school for a year and travel around the world.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So, okay. So this sounds to me like anathema to a personality that has been formed such as yours has. So how did you arrive at a level of comfort and embrace around this concept?
When John and I got married, he had just graduated business school and I took a 4-month sabbatical at Google, actually a 3-month sabbatical, and then somehow manipulated my way into a 1-month gig in South Korea, training some of the leaders there who were new to Google at the time. And so we did 4 months in Southeast Asia. And we met this couple, both Harvard Business School grads who were traveling around the world with their 11 and 13-year-old daughters. And we were like, we are going to do that. And then life happens. Then Google happened. Then I was already at Google, but then my husband's in jobs after business school. My son was struggling a little bit, and you just easily stop thinking that dream can be a reality because it's like life hits you like a ton of bricks, right? And it was when we decided that a couple months ago, John should leave his job and help me run the business. We no longer had any adult barriers to prevent us from doing this, and we started to revisit. And it was a pretty easy shift, actually. I mean, whatever I'm excited about, I'm all in. So whether it's like hitting the times or building a career program at Google or delivering the best keynote the audience has ever seen, I am all in. So the moment we were like, you know what, John, if you leave your job, we could freaking do this thing that we've been talking about for over a decade and just kind of assumed was never going to happen. But it could happen now. And it was a pretty fast shift. And then we started doing more research about how we would do the year, because I don't think we want to be someplace for a week, get on a plane, be someplace for a week, then someplace for 2 weeks. So I think we're going to do 3 major chunks for the most part. One of them is going to be semester at sea, the college study abroad program, not an adult or family version of it, the actual boat with the college juniors and then us. So I think we'll do 3.5-month semester at sea. I think we'll do a hub in Europe and a hub in Asia. And we'll homeschool the kids / do some kind of online program / something local that might have some kind of tutoring options, and then travel from there. So have a little bit of a hub and spoke model, have those as hubs, and then travel from those hubs to various places in Europe and various places in Asia.
Okay, so 2 follow-on questions to this. One is, we'll do them one at a time. So I'm not doing the double barreling. One is, what about the business now? So obviously I know that not having grown-up jobs makes it more possible, but what about your business now makes this feel possible and safe in all the ways that it might have felt unsafe before?
Well, I'm making money. And so, it's 2 things. It's I'm making money. I'm making way more money than I expected, which just honestly feels awesome. Like, I am not going to lie and be like, I don't care about money anymore. I absolutely care about money. I think about it a lot. And money enables a lot. Money's awesome, right? You just want to keep your relationship with money in check. I am not making that morsel of what I wanted to make. I'm making 5, 6, 7x what I thought I would make my first year in business. I've basically been in business like 10 months because I didn't really have a business until the book came out. So that's awesome. And then also, I'm just living in less fear and I'm optimizing for more joy, like my husband, and more adventure and having this enhancement mindset versus this scarcity mindset. And that's both the money, that's the new way I could apply. I'm not saying I'm some changed person, Barrett, right? Like I still am who I am in the body that I live in. But I think my fear-based, my non-wild courage mindset like I had when I was leaving Google would be, but what if this doesn't work? What if I'm a starving artist? What if I can never make another dime? And that could apply in this case, because I could easily say, if I only work 10% that year or 0%, and it's going to be somewhere between probably 10 and 20% that year, there's literally no internet on the boat for 3.5 months, okay? You get 15 minutes of internet a day. I'm not exactly doing a keynote in that situation. So I could easily say, if I do this, again, fear-based, fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, fear of judgment by others, I'll never be able to build the business up again. I'm on such a great trajectory now. I've launched this business. It's working. I'm turning away business. I'm raising my prices. Everything I would have dreamed of why 2 years after I launched this would I shut it all down? What if I'd lose my chief of staff, right? What if no clients come back to me? What if my speaking agents, I'm dead to them, and it's like, well, what have you done for me recently, right? We don't know if you're not top of mind, we're never going to book you. So that would have been my fear-based mindset. But now I'm like, holy hell, if I was able to do this and build something from nothing, having no experience as an entrepreneur, having no experience as a writer, having no experience as a keynote speaker, and be this successful this quickly, see my father-in-law's statement, I will never bet against her, then it doesn't serve me for a second to live in fear that I won't be able to replicate this again. So I now know that if I shut the business down for a year to invest in this adventure with my family, which will be absolutely priceless, not a once in a lifetime experience. So few people do this in a lifetime. If I invest in this, I can now trust that I can build it up again.
Yeah. So you've built some proof. You now know it, in fact, not just in theory, that you're able to do it. And the underlying traits will still exist, just like we talked about before. But now you have proved them outside of the Google context, or you've proved their value outside of the Google context. Right. Okay. So my mildly challenging question on this is, I think there's always the brain understanding. And then there's the like body, soul, heart level understanding. Do you feel like you've reached that, or do you feel like you're going to have to live into that part of it as you go?
The body, soul level understanding that
you'll be okay, that this will be okay. This is a good decision and you'll be able to build it back after you return.
I'm pretty there. I'm pretty there. Yeah. I'm not saying that there aren't going to be wrinkles to iron out of what percent time does my chief of staff work and what percent time should I work and do I take a keynote? So like, I mean, send me a letter from your typewriter 18 months from now and check in and say like, okay, so are you really able to shut it down and not schedule a keynote for when you know you're going to be in Istanbul at a Airbnb that has good Wi-Fi because you're worried about turning down a keynote? Like, easier said than done, but no part of me is second guessing taking this trip. I am just like a bundle of butterflies and energy. And all I want to do is talk to people who've done this and learn the best way to homeschool and the best online programs and whether we should do this cohort-based program in Uruguay or Portugal or Andalusia or do some other thing. That's like not all I can think about, but I said to my husband last night, and again, John tends to be pretty present, pretty chill. And I was like, how often are you thinking about this trip around the world? He's like, occasionally. And I was like, I used to think about it 20 times a day. And now I think about it like 190 times a day, John. So,
he's like, okay.
My point isn't to be competitive about how many times we're thinking about it. My point is to share with you that it's like all positive for me. And yes, there is the business thing that I will have to figure out, but it's a great exercise in recklessness, right? It's a great exercise in trust. It's a great exercise in wild courage.
That's awesome. I love hearing that arc. I feel like even since we talked in October, a lot of that has been reinforced. I think there were still some questions at the time around coaching, bill rate, how does all of this work? And it seems like it's all just started to prove itself out for you.
Yeah, which realistically is part of what I needed, right? I needed the proof. And I think that's in any industry, in any new job, in any new role, in any new product launch, like people tend to need that to reinforce it. And I think as we get older over time, we're able to then connect the dots between past success and future potential or future success. I seem to be behind the ball on that. And I keep needing new proof in that specific domain, but I'm getting there. And I think the way my life design is shaping up to be, which is more high net freedom, more optimizing for joy, more optimizing for adventure, and less like squeezing every possible opportunity, that exists to hit the New York Times or to get that promotion at Google or to launch some big thing. The more I lean back, the more not that I'm like leaning back, let's be real, but the more I'm just able to create more space in my life, the more I'm able to trust and to settle into the goodness, the richness, the potential, the opportunity, and the future safety.
Yeah, I think this is a journey I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs go on. I mean, I have my own version of it, obviously, but so many of the clients that I work with, there is a version of the truth and tales thing, or I refer to them as stories, that we tell ourselves, where when you're at the beginning of a path, and you've talked about this too, you told it as a story, maybe with Greg McKeown or Jonathan Fields, about hiking and like asking a park ranger about all of the optimal hikes to take and all of this.
Yeah.
When you're at the beginning of a path, if you don't yet have any facts or truth to go on, like when you're starting a business, there are no facts yet. There are only tales and stories about what might happen.
Yeah.
And so you do have to actually build the facts along the way and respond to them. And I see that happening for you. Like you've now had enough runway 10 months after the book's been out to build up a series of facts and truth that say, okay, now I can associate stories to these things, as opposed to it just being imagination only.
Yeah. And trust the people around you who are smart and who believe in you and who say, it's about you, Barrett. It's about you, James. It's about you, Ritzio, like whatever, whoever you are, like trust that people believe in you and that will carry you through. And like, yes, it's a new domain. Like that's what I wish I had been able to do better, is to just trust that I've been successful in the past, I can be successful in the future. But yes, I needed the proof in this specific area of entrepreneurship, of coaching, of keynotes, of book launch. I needed the proof in this specific domain to feel a little bit more settled. What I would want for people is to experience the transitive property of like, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right? Like if you did it there, you can do it here. Because I think that's where people feel stuck. And because the most stressful parts of life are transitions, right? Life cycle events or transition to a new job, a new relationship, a new city, a new friendship, or out of those things, out of a job, out of a city, out of a relationship, out of a friendship. And that's when people feel stuck. And that's when the fear comes raging in. And it does take that leap of faith to push past that fear and to trust. Like so much is about trust. And I'm still on that journey,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. There's so many more little rabbit holes we could go down, but we're running out of time. So I'll ask you my 3 closing questions. Sure. The first of which is, if you look back at your career to this point, and especially this latest chapter of becoming an author, speaker, and now coach, what do you see yourself having become world-class at this point?
Getting people pumped, whether it's inspiring a room of over 1,000 people or getting the book launch team pumped about the book launch or getting a one-on-one coaching client pumped that they can go crush this interview or push back on their boss who wants them to do the job of 3 people because they just laid off 2 and they're not going to get any more pay. Getting people pumped and instilling confidence in them.
Love that. As you take on this chapter and you now get to be fully in control of your own mission and vision of your work, what is the change that you hope that you're able to create through the work you do?
Can I say getting people pumped?
Sure.
I want to get people more pumped. No, work has created so much anxiety for me. And what my boss thinks of me and, what I'm going to say in that one-on-one with them. Because a lot of the stuff I do it's professional development. And it's not really life coaching. It's like straight up leadership, professional development, navigating politics at work, that kind of coaching. Mm-hmm. And especially for high achievers. And so if I can make people slightly less stressed, slightly less anxious about work, which is where they spend the vast majority of their time and even more of their brain space, then I feel like I'm doing a service to the world, because I know I've experienced really, really, really hard moments, bad performance scores, tricky relationships with bosses, feeling embarrassed, insecure, foolish at work, and just making some bonehead moves, that if I can help people feel more at ease, more confidence, sleep better at night, not have the Sunday scaries. It's just work is such a big part of people's lives that, especially if you work in a corporation where there's so much politics, you're never losing sleep over like the metric you missed. You're losing sleep over thinking that person's side eye in that meeting was directed against you, or that you are stepping on someone's toes when you present the project, but they also worked on it. Like, this is the shit that keeps people up at night. So if I can help people sleep slightly better at night without the trazodone, but with the confidence that they can apply Wild Courage to work and be a lot happier, a lot more successful, a lot more content, that feels like my life's mission.
And as you do all of this work and you kind of emerge into everything that's ahead of you, who are you becoming along the way?
I'm becoming someone who's climbing my second mountain of being high net freedom, of prioritizing relationships more deeply. There's the classic longitudinal Harvard study about like what keeps you living long and healthy. It's your relationships, not the number, but the depth. And prioritizing my kids more, prioritizing my husband more, prioritizing community and friendships and hikes with friends versus me, cramming, listening to a podcast to prep for some show, or to listen back to my keynote to perfect it even more next time and help that laugh line land just slightly better because I'm not stepping on the audience's laughter and just trying to like squeeze every ounce of productivity out of every moment. I am becoming someone who can be more and enjoy more and think about productivity, not just as classic productivity, but as emotional productivity, relational productivity, leisure productivity, where I set an intention to watch a bunch of Instagram funny videos and giggle at them and consider that productive because it's fun.
I love that. Well, Jenny, this was a delight. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Good Work. I'm your host, Barrett Brooks, and if this conversation resonated with you, I'd encourage you to check out Jenny's book, Wild Courage, where she unpacks the 9 traits that help ambitious people take bold action without losing themselves in the process. You can also follow her work in speaking at her website and across social media. She shares a ton of thoughtful insight on leadership, ambition, and designing a life with intention. As always, you can find full show notes at goodworkshow.com or barrettbrooks.com/podcast, including links to Jenny's work, resources we mentioned, and summaries of every past episode of the show. If this is your first time listening, welcome. I hope you'll stick around. Hit follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss the next conversation. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your support. I hope you'll pass this episode along to one friend who's been thinking deeply about their work, or perhaps quietly wrestling with what success is really costing them. You never know how much it might help and how much it might unlock a new chapter of their life and career. This show, as always, is produced by my friends at Podcast Royale. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next episode.